Hey everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, and that is Caleb. And guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Husker Spring Game is in the book, and we have a lot to talk about today. It was a blast being in Memorial Stadium again. Caleb and I were there enjoying it. Of course, we got the battle scars, the sunburn to prove our attendance, of course. And we have a lot to talk about today. It's going to be a good one. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm doing good, yes. Josh and I are not blushing the whole video.
No.
It is just it's that great vitamin D that we've been missing.
Yeah, I forgot that. It's like, oh yeah, it's May 1st. Maybe I should get some sunscreen before I go to this game. Nope, didn't even think about it, of course.
Yeah,
but it was a fun one, man. I think we learned a lot about the Huskers in this game, especially on the offensive side of the ball with some usage and how we're going to see these guys play out with having basically most of the first team offense there on the red side of the ball. And it was a really, really fun game, I think, as a whole, to kind of see these guys go out there, compete. Of course, having the fans back in the stadium, man, it was a blast. So in today's video, we're going over basically the biggest takeaways of the spring game, some of the things that we learned that are going to be crucial heading into this offseason and into the fall. And I think we got a lot to talk about. So Caleb, take us away. What are your first thoughts on the spring game? Let's start with the wide receivers. Where are you at with this group?
For both of us, we had a lot of questions. We wanted to see how Samori Toure would be and Omar Manning.
Yeah,
and we both got to see quite a few reps out of them, which was exciting. I think Toure ran some really good routes, caught pretty much everything we saw. Obviously, Omar had that one drop, but besides that, he was featured a lot, caught a lot of good balls in the same light. So I thought he looked pretty good overall. Sadly, Xavier Betts was on the white team and didn't get to see the same amount of touches. But I did think positively of this wide receivers group. Again, Toure and Omar Manning was definitely a surprise, to be sure. Not quite sure how much we would see him, and to get him play as much as he did and to play well, it was exciting. And he looks really to be a deep ball threat, which is obviously something Nebraska was desperately needing last year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, like I said, going into this game, it was highlighting, circling Omar Manning and what he could do in his offense. You could tell it meant a lot to him. He was out there really competing hard, trying to make some plays. And yeah, that drop definitely hurts, considering it was going to be like a 50 yard play somewhere in there. And it was right in his hands, probably Adrian's best ball of the whole day. And it didn't connect, which really is unfortunate. But I agree, usage wise is really interesting. Of course, Omar on the outside, Toure on the inside. Yeah, I was really happy, like you said, with Toure and some of the moves he was making on the inside moves to get open. Obviously, Wan'Dale, that was his bread and butter last year, trying to get open across the middle of the field. And looks like Toure is going to be the guy in the line of fire this year, where the defense is taking some of those big hits across the field. And I think as a whole, I came away pretty optimistic about the receiving core, especially at the top with Omar Manning and Toure now being the guys for us, along with Xavier Betts. And I agree, Oliver Martin would look like another pretty solid surprise, all reliable, great blocking downfield, which we saw last year, and then even in the spring game this year as well. I thought just really overall a positive experience for the receiving core. And, you know, we saw a few other guys. I mean, what are your thoughts as a whole with the depth in this group? Because I'm not totally convinced. Like, let's say, knock on wood, like Toure got hurt or something along those lines. Omar Manning, you know, still has issues this year again. Like, I'm still not convinced by the depth of this group for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think we're very thin, and obviously Omar Manning not being able to play last year obviously brings a lot of questions. Yeah, I think it definitely not be a good sign if one of those guys did go down. And just as a couple things with Omar Manning too. His footwork was actually really nice off the line. I remember going back and watching some of those chop steps that he did, or some of those speed moves that he did, I thought was really impressive out of him. He could really get separation.
Dude, Manning had as many targets in this game as he had snaps all of last season. He had 5 targets in the spring game, which he had 5 snaps all of last year. He ended up with 3 receptions after 5 targets with 24 yards, so 8 yards per reception. Toure had 4 targets, 3 receptions, 47 yards, so 15.7 yards per reception there. And very Oliver Martin had 7 targets, 5 receptions, 47 yards, so 9.4 yards per reception. As a whole, I think a few other guys that kind of at least impressed a little bit would be like Will Nixon looked pretty impressive, I think, as a whole. He ended up with 7 targets with 5 receptions and 37 yards on the day. I mean, as a redshirt freshman, I think he could be a contributor this season as well. And I thought he made a handful of impressive plays throughout the game. And I think Jamie Nance was another guy that showed at least some burst and some speed. That could be an interesting player this year as well. I mean, he was a 4-star, now a redshirt freshman this year again. So I don't know. Those 2 guys that definitely were interesting. Of course, Alante Brown there, unfortunately didn't get to see the field. So those are the guys that I think provide the depth for us, but I wouldn't be confident in them in case of injuries or if guys aren't able to be used this fall, Let's go to the quarterbacks, man. I think there's obviously a lot of juicy talk there with the quarterbacks. We're going to start with the offensive side of the ball, probably talk a little bit of defense at the end, even though there isn't as many takeaways on that side of the ball. But quarterback-wise, of course, Adrian saw the starting work for the red team. Then you had Heinrich Haarberg and Logan Smothers splitting time on the white side of the ball for the first half. And then Logan took over for the red team in the second half with the full contact, of course. No, only full contact in the second half, no full contact in the first half, which is where Adrian got basically all of his work with the no contact. So there were some interesting things there. Of course, also insanely windy. So there is an asterisk next to some of the accuracy metrics here for the quarterbacks probably because it was crazy windy. To be fair, Caleb and I went golfing after the spring game. And it was crazy. All right. It was where this was no joke wind here. All right. So, that is to be taken into account. It did affect our games. But okay. Thoughts on Adrian, Caleb? What do you see from Adrian in this game? Did you see some improvement? A little bit of optimism, maybe some thoughts as a whole, the pros and the cons. Where you at with it?
Yeah. I mean, the start, Adrian was 12 of 20, 127 yards, 6.35 yards per attempt. And obviously that one pick. I think the one good thing that we saw of him, he's looked a little bit thinner. I think that's
faster,
good for him.
I think.
Yeah, and a little faster because of it. Obviously, I think after his sophomore year, they were so concerned about him getting injured. They really wanted to bulk him up, make him bigger so that he would be less injury prone. But I think they kind of went a little bit over with that.
Then we got thick with 2 C's, Adrian. He got thick, boy.
And he was a little too big.
Yeah.
And so I think we kind of are at a happy medium with Adrian here where, he's got a little more weight to him. He's got more muscle, obviously going into his 4th year here at Nebraska. But also at the same time, he's not too big where that's limiting his speed. And we definitely did see some more bursts out of him this year. And I think he did look a little bit faster. Obviously throwing still a concern for Adrian. I do like that he has some better targets. I think that's going to really help. The offensive line didn't look too bad. Obviously, they're going against second team, but he did have lots of time to throw. And, there were still some misses. Obviously, the pick is what it is. And with the better targets, we can see hopefully a little bit better of an offense.
Yeah, I thought we saw some of the vintage Adrian Martinez with some of the mistakes he made, but also I thought we saw a little bit of improvement when it came to some of his ability to zip that ball towards the sidelines at points. And we saw a really nice, off his back foot leaning throw to the right side of the field there, basically off 1 foot at one point in the second quarter, which was a really nice throw. Obviously, both of our worries with Adrian always came with his ability to actually step into a throw with pressure. Climbing the pocket to make a throw has always been a massive weakness of Adrian Martinez's game. And we really didn't see that in this game either. So, usually when the option either presents itself to climb the pocket and or spin out and run towards one of the sidelines, he usually takes the option B. And so that's always something we're looking for. Of course, we also were looking for the deep balls, the deep shots downfield, which we took a few of them. Of course, the wind probably limited the chances that we got to see. And we saw the one with Omar. We saw the one throw downfield that was intercepted, which was by no means a great throw. I know you can kind of probably write it off a little bit because it was a few seconds, the last throw of the drive for him, basically. The last throw of the half, for him. So, there are those question marks, but he probably could have thrown that ball that was picked off a little bit better. Again, he didn't fully commit to the throw. He didn't fully step into it. And it gets underthrown and picked, which is something that we've seen in the past. The other vintage, I think, Adrian moment we saw was when he just full sent zipped that thing to the back of the end zone towards Omar Manning. It was just over his head and uncatchable.
I wish there too, we didn't see one fade throw to the end zone. We really haven't had that in our bag whatsoever as Nebraska.
The corner fades.
And that's obviously not on Adrian whatsoever because we're not really calling it. And yeah, one other thing, I definitely agree with you on the pocket. There was just times where Adrian could have essentially just escape pressure by just moving up the pocket or sidestepping in the pocket, and he just has way too happy feet. And even when he's getting the 2-hand touched, he's still not willing to make that throw as pressure's coming toward him. The unwillingness to do that there in the game, that's one big fear that we have, that he's just not willing to wear one of those on the chin to make the play. There was also some backward passes. Again, that's on the coaches. Again, that's frustrating. We lost a game essentially. We've essentially almost lost 2 games because of those backward throws. I think of the game because of the game to Indiana last year as well.
Moving forward, I would walk away from this at least a little bit more optimistic than I was before with Adrian and his ability to at least hit those like 11 to 20 yard type intermediate throws downfield. Again, it was windy, so there are those, you can give him a little bit of a break with some of the downfield stuff. I'm totally fine with that. At the end of the day, somewhat positive from Adrian, I think, as a whole from the spring game. And I think we can move forward at least a little bit more optimistic about the starting offense, especially the passing game in that sense.
Yeah.
Moving forward,
I think, with the wide receivers, I think it could be a definite net positive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I saw the exact same Adrian, but I do think the offensive weapons could really take away some of those mistakes. There was a couple, throws that were high, obviously with the wind, that weren't that accurate. Omar Manning was able to go up there because he's a taller target and get them. Same thing with Toure. So I think that's really going to be a huge difference in Adrian, who can, he definitely seems to miss targets just like a little bit high sometimes.
Yeah.
If that is the case. And I think those guys can really, just pluck the ball out of the sky.
Yeah. So as for the other two quarterbacks as well, I mean, we had Haarberg going, we had Logan Smothers going, the two backups, the kind of the duel there, and what we were interested to see. I mean, Caleb and I were both interested to see Logan Smothers because there's been so little talk about him from the coaches basically after he came in as a 4-star, but it was probably a pretty disappointing performance as a whole from Smothers. I mean, basically he ended up being 8 for 14, 76 yards, and a touchdown as a whole. He didn't get as many reps as you would have liked to see him get, probably in the spring game as a whole. He did. Yeah,
we were talking about that. Like, we were almost concerned that he was hurt.
Right at the beginning of the game, yeah.
Because Haarberg got so much more
time
than he did.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I mean, again, Haarberg came in as a true freshman. I mean, he's basically a high school senior still right now in the spring, And I mean, he came in and looked pretty solid as a whole. I mean, I would say he made some really impressive throws in the game. And he had, I would say, it's like probably some deceptive speed as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There was a couple times where he could really escape the pocket, escape that defensive end, and turn a play into a positive few yards. He was 9 of 23 for 121 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Again, he had that game-winning throw at the end of the game.
Yeah.
That's the 2 back-to-back 30-plus yard throws. Inconsistent from both Smothers and Haarberg. I was again disappointed in Smothers.
Yeah, definitely
I felt like
more
some of his
disappointed
throws,
in Smothers, I'd say.
Yeah, again, some of the throws were throwing pretty inaccurate. Again, the win time.
Yeah, I guess I was more looking for like the downfield throwing or like at least a little bit more like arm strength maybe shown off.
He was fast.
Logan.
If I was gonna say one good thing,
Definitely.
He seemed to be the fastest quarterback. And I think that's a positive. I would have loved to see some more like option stuff run with him because he looked to be the fastest quarterback that we had on the field. That'd be awesome.
At the end of the day, though, they'll prioritize Haarberg's red shirt. Like, let's say Adrian got hurt in week 3 or something, or week 4. Like, maybe Haarberg plays 2 or 3 of those games, but at the end of the day, I would imagine they'll prioritize Smothers playing to make sure Haarberg
you'd want to use him.
His red shirt.
And also you don't want to lose him. We've lost a few quarterbacks now under Scott Frost's tenure.
The quarterback depth is actually an issue, is like somewhat of a question. I mean, 3 deep is fine, but realistically, one of these guys will see the field at some point this year. So
yeah, at some point they're going to see the field, at least for a drive.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I think that was a lot of fun watching those guys play and how that could play out. But let's go. Okay, running backs wise, it is quite the packed room. It is crazy
fun.
I mean, it's a fun time for sure. I mean, we saw 8 guys that looked real solid, maybe 9. You could maybe even argue 10 guys that looked decent. And it was interesting. Of course, like right now you're looking at guys like Marvin, the guys who played in the game, like Marvin Scott, Sevion Morrison, Ronald Tompkins, Ramir Johnson, Jock Yant, Gabe Irvin, like Isaiah Harris. All these guys had some interesting plays throughout the game. And then, of course, that's not even counting Marquis Stepp, who didn't play in the game, the transfer from USC, who's hurt right now in practice, earlier this year. So thoughts on the running backs as a whole, where you at these guys, what stood out to you? Yeah,
I mean, I think for you and me, this was probably the most circled thing on our watch list.
Definitely.
Because we didn't really know how this was going to shake out. And we were both, I think, most concerned about the running back depth. Obviously, we pretty much, we lost most of the guys that saw the field. And so there was a lot of questions. Although, like, after we had kind of posted that video, all the Jock Yant stuff, the whispers on the internet had kind of started to start. And he is a big-bodied force on the field. And he was a lot of fun. I definitely saw it. I think he'd be a great 3rd and short kind of guy.
For sure.
If it's not a QB sneak situation. I think a lot of these guys are going to see the field, and it's going to be running back by committee. I think Gabe Irvin turned out to be probably my favorite of the running backs that I saw. I thought he had really good speed. He had some good moves and decent hands as well. I think Gabe Irvin looked very nice.
Yeah, he was great, man.
Again, in the short little window that we got to see, I thought he operated the best.
Yeah, I mean, Irvin had some really fun, like, quick jab steps and, like, really reminiscent of, like, a true athlete, and, like, as a true freshman to be able to come out here and like, look that athletic and that smooth with the ball, I think it's pretty impressive. So,
and he had some break tackle ability,
yeah,
too.
I agree. I thought he was just really, really a fun player to watch, and it's hard to say that he'll see the field this year or more than just his 4 games as a redshirt freshman, probably. But, I think in the future, he'll be a fun guy to keep your eye on moving forward after this season for sure. And I mean, Marvin Scott, he seems like he's right down the middle, kind of exactly what we assumed he was after last season. Maybe a little bit faster this year, maybe a little bit step faster, but as a whole, he doesn't seem that explosive or that exciting. I mean, which player do you think out of like Marvin Scott, Sevion, Ronald Tompkins, Ramir Johnson, Marquis Stepp, who do you think is going to be like the lead back there?
Well, I mean, I would assume it's Stepp, even though he's hurt. I mean, we saw Marvin Scott play a little bit more than the other guys last year. Yep. So you'd maybe think it's him. Against Sevion, we didn't get to see enough, and same with Ramir Johnson because they were a little bit like banged up, right?
Yep.
They didn't get too many runs.
Yeah, and Ronald Tompkins was a little banged up too.
Yeah, again, love to see more out of those guys. Again, I wish we could see 10 spring practices. Yeah. That'd be fantastic. Because I know, we could feel like we really know. But again, in the short sample size, I would assume it's probably Marvin Scott. He's also clearly been able to stay healthy. Right. And that's a great trait to have for a football player.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think the crazy thing about this room is because of the COVID year, the skip year basically for all eligibility. Yeah. I mean, we don't have a sophomore in this room. Not even we don't have a redshirt sophomore or a sophomore in this room. It's redshirt freshman for Marquis Stepp, freshman for Marvin Scott, freshman for Sevion, redshirt freshman Ronald Tompkins, redshirt freshman Ramir Johnson, then freshman for Jock Yant, and then true freshman for Gabe Irvin. So it's a crazy eligibility youthful room. Obviously, Ronald Tompkins and Ramir Johnson would technically be true juniors, with their 3rd year in the program now. But it is crazy when you look at it from an eligibility standpoint for how long these guys could be in the program now moving forward.
Yeah, COVID makes everything super interesting. I don't even know if that works or declaring. I'm not even quite sure.
I think technically it counts as a year where you could declare as a
That's
quote
crazy.
unquote true sophomore, I guess, or as a redshirt freshman. Technically, it's a weird year now with the eligibilities, but so either way, it is pretty interesting with eligibility for the future here. So I agree with you. I think Stepp probably has the step on the rest of the room. I would say in the long term, Irvin showed the most upside, and Yant, maybe if he sheds 10, 15 pounds.
10 pounds, yeah. And they said that
Ryan Held said he weighed in at 248. So,
if he gets to 230,
230 something,
230,
yeah,
230,
yeah, somewhere in there, that could get pretty interesting for him and show off some athleticism. I think that'd be pretty awesome. So you can definitely see the hype for him for sure. So yeah, it basically feels like, well, any of these guys could probably do the job because no one really stands out that far ahead of anybody else. So I think that's kind of where we're at with the room right now, where it should be a solid room, but I don't see anyone blowing us away unless Stepp is that guy. Based off his film from last year from USC, he was solid and definitely had some explosiveness in that Notre Dame game, but who's to say he's not?
I could definitely see one of those pretty young guys like Gabe or some of those other ones that are coming in. Say if one of them, they'll probably each get some snaps. If one of them could start ripping off big runs in games, that wouldn't surprise me too much.
Yeah.
If one of them could kind of separate themselves, but again, staying healthy is an extremely important trait, especially for the running back position.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I mean, overall, I guess let's talk O-line and tight end real quick. Ooh. It's a little bit weird when you talk about the O-line in this game, where it's you do get to see quite a bit from them, but obviously not everybody was playing full minutes or whatever it is. So it is tough to get some takeaways exactly how the usage is going to go, but it did come off as it looks like the offensive guard position is probably where the battles lie. Brant Banks was a pretty interesting player that kind of stood out to us.
Yeah, Brant looked really good. I kept saying when we watch, during the spring game, you're kind of watching for the athletes, some of the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and then once we started to go back and watching film, Josh and I were really starting to focus in on the offensive line a lot more. And Brant Banks, I kept saying, who's the 74? That was a really good push. Yeah. Or that was a really good block, or he pulled really well, and it kept being Brant Banks. So he impressed me quite a bit. I mean, he is 6'7", and he just looked big, and he was a force the whole game. I definitely think he can see some playing time, and I think, again, in our sample size, I really felt like he won the battle to get the starting role.
Yeah, I agree.
Day.
He looked awesome, man. I really do agree. And I mean, yeah, he had some like impressive plays. He even lined up at tackle a little bit and had some pull plays, and it was just great overall. The only other like real thing that stood out to me was some poor snap usage from the white side of the ball with Trent Hickson snapping on that side. Besides that, I wouldn't say there was too many other big takeaways besides maybe a little bit of worry about the O-line as a whole, especially on the tackle position. I wasn't fully impressed with Cochran.
He kind of had a rough day, I felt like.
Yeah, I agree. And Bryce Benhart didn't look too great either. So when you're looking at those two guys, you're like, all right, we need these guys to step up. And I wouldn't say I was overly impressed with either of them, but there's a lot of time to go. So I'm not going to rule it out that we could still have a pretty solid offensive line this year. I do think as a whole, it'll probably be slightly better than last year, but it is still kind of hard to say exactly what this core is going to look like by the time the regular season rolls around. So yeah, tight end wise, nothing too crazy. Kind of like what we expect with like Vokalek and Austin Allen kind of just doing their things over there. Nothing too surprising. Austin Allen didn't.
Wish we could have saw Fredone.
Yeah, and then of course Fedone's injury is really disappointing as well. So that really sucks.
And defense, again, I'd say that Josh and I were looking at it less originally just because, the offense feels like we have more question marks. The defense is a lot more shirt up. But the Will Honus injury.
Yeah, that's the big news, man. That was the big news from the last video we made was, man, that sucks.
Will Honus getting injured.
He went down, basically. He's Frost said in the last few plays of the last practice of the year in the spring.
Non-contact.
And Will went down, grabbing his knee. And so Frost said in the post game for the spring game, it doesn't look good for Will. And he says we probably for sure won't have him for the start of the season. And I mean, very likely for the whole season. At this point, I would imagine probably an ACL tear. No confirmation yet, but everything points to an ACL tear at this point. So that really, really sucks. So I guess the first question is, based on what we saw, who's going to replace him, and who's going to replace him as one of the leaders on this defense and the inside linebacker position for us in the 3-4, of course. And who do you think could be there, man? I mean, the previous starters would have been JoJo, Honus, Reimer, and probably Garrett Nelson on the outside. Where are you at with this now?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Kaleravec, the transfer.
Yeah, Chris.
Wyndon Hoahuli, who isn't on campus yet because he was this year's recruit, and he will be there in the fall. But I think Kaleravec probably. Maga Clements,
he did not
look that good.
No,
he didn't. He oversold on some plays. I didn't think he looked great in pass coverage. Maybe Snodgrass on the inside there.
Yeah, I agree.
I think is a viable option.
Right. I mean, maybe a few other guys would be like Jake Archer comes to mind. Like Chris Cassidy, McCormick potentially, but like. I would say a lot of this rides on Kaleravec looking really, really good. I would say I was pretty impressed with him as a whole, and during the spring game, he looked like he had a nice first step, and as a whole, I thought he had some nice closing speed too. So we have a lot more depth, I feel like, on the outside linebackers than we do on the inside linebackers. And so losing Honus just really, really sucks. Definitely scares me. So Kaleravec is going to be a lot riding on him, man. And we cannot afford injuries to Kaleravec, Reimer. We need these guys to stay healthy, bro. Otherwise, defensively, I think a few things that we noticed, maybe Caleb Tanner looked a little bit thinner, maybe a little bit faster than last season as well, which I think we needed to see too, because he did look a little bit slow last year, especially on the outside when he's, basically was only a solid run stopper last year, really struggled in pass coverage or in pass rushing as a whole. I don't know. What other thoughts do you have on the defensive side?
Yeah, I thought Braxton Clark had a nice play when he deflected that pass. Adrian Martinez towards the end zone. I thought he looked pretty good too.
Yeah.
Again, just excited to see some more depth in that secondary. So.
For sure. I think what we learned is that Quentin Newsome's probably the starter there, at least as of this point at the cornerback position. Yeah, I would say that was interesting. And Nadab Joseph wasn't out there because he was injured. And so I thought Isaac Gifford showed a few things as well I thought was pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean, Miles Farmer, there was a few plays there where you're like, dang, man, he looked solid. But then there was a play there where Gabe Irvin kind of bounced to the outside and outpaced Miles Farmer there, which was really impressive. Yeah. And it's like that. Those were a few plays where I'm like, dang, man, Gabe Irvin looked really, really good. And I'm surprised that Miles Farmer couldn't get to him there. And so as a whole, defensively, again, it was basically focused around the Will Honus thing and seeing what that replacement could look like. I still feel pretty confident about this team. And I thought defensively we looked pretty good. And I mean, hey, the white offense had nowhere to go in that first half, even in the non-contact.
Yeah. They did not. Yeah.
Let's go.
Again, it was a low scoring game, which hopefully speaks more about the good depth at defense.
Yeah, than the unfortunate offense.
Than a poor offense.
Facts.
We're gonna stay on the positive side that our defense is just nasty.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I just think it's just a little bit tough with the takeaways for the defensive in a situation like that, especially when you have all the starters basically running non-contact in the first half, and then it's basically all backups in the second half. So it gets a little bit tough. I think that's it for the video for now, but drop all your comments down below about the spring game, your thoughts, and what your takeaways from the game as a whole. We'd love to see them. Your hot takes, your big takes about the team and what you learned about the Huskers moving forward in this offseason. Our upload schedule might be a little bit weird here moving forward. We're going to try to get out at least like one video every so often, every few weeks, and keep up with you guys during the little bit slow months here in the offseason and have some fun, having a few fun videos. We're thinking about doing maybe some film breakdown videos as well, and just have some fun with it this offseason. What's the point if we're not having some fun with it? So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and just drop our comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you guys really enjoyed it. But as always, guys, I'm Josh. That's Caleb. This has been Backseat Sports, and guys, we will see you next time. We out. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.